Lads, welcome back to Fusion YGO. It is your boy Christian, the Haver Card Man, coming at you with another deck profile today. We're doing something a little bit different this time. We are doing some Runick Orcust. I know people have probably theorized a little bit with this deck in the past. Not a whole lot, so I'm going to try to bring my ideas to the table today and see what you guys think. Before we get into it, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. We are on our goal to 2,000 subscribers. We got a pretty good start. You guys have been absolutely fantastic with supporting the channel, and we love to see it. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into the deck profile today. So starting off with the main deck here, we are going to be running 3 Girsu, the Orcust Mech Knight. This is the one and only normal summon that you care about in this deck. I know for once I'm not actually playing a scrap variant. It's weird. It feels very weird and a little bit wrong, but you know, it is what it is. Next up, we're also playing 3 Orcust Nightmare. This is another card that you also really do want to open with in your hand in this current build. We'll get into more of that later on how the synergies work with this card, but I'm sure some of you fans of Orcust and Runick can already guess what's happening here. Next up, we're also playing 2 World Legacy World Wand. Doesn't feel bad to open one of these, being able to send another one to the graveyard to special summon one from hand, but you don't really want to brick on too many of these, so 2 is just fine. Next up, we're playing 2 Orcust Symbol Skeleton. Absolutely fantastic for graveyard revival. Symbol Skeletons is a great card. If you end up getting one stuck in the managed pile, you need another one in rotation, it comes up. We're also playing 1 Orcust Brass Bombard in case we get bricked up with Orcust names in our hand. Doesn't happen too often, but I have had times where this guy has come in absolute clutch, and I do enjoy having him in the deck. Now for our honorary non-Orcust monsters, we are running 1 Dark Grepher, allowing you to pitch any of these dark monsters from your hand for free to be able to send another one from deck. One of the best cards in the deck. Whenever you see him, he's just a really clutch combo. This is your 4th normal summon, so you're only running 4 normal summons really in the deck, but there's a couple of these other names that also can work well as normal summons if need be. Lastly here, we have 1 Machina Ruin Force. This guy is great to fill up your banish pile, be able to set up things for your Orcust Link monsters to shuffle back into the deck, help OTK in the right instances. I know this is a Runick deck, so that doesn't seem like a great idea, but it can come up, and also is a way to play around evenly matched, which is pretty strong as well. And that's it for the Orcust monsters. Let's take a look at the rest of the engine. We are playing 1 Orchestrated Babel, as is pretty much mandatory with any sort of Orcust build, playing the field spell. You don't necessarily go into this as often as you would think, though. Next up here is 1 Orchestrated Return, being able to send an Orcust or World Legacy from your field or hand to grave to draw 2 cards. Feels pretty free in this deck. I absolutely love it. And then next up, we are playing 2 Orcust Crescendo to round off the Orcust engine. This is the main thing that you're going to be searching for off of stuff like your Galatea. This is just a completely free Omni Negate that banishes on resolution, and then as a follow-up, like during your opponent's turn or something, you can banish it from the graveyard to add a Dark Machine, or to add an Orcust monster from your deck to your hand, but you can only special summon Dark Machine monsters the turn you activate this, so be careful with that graveyard effect. So that does it for the Orcust engine. Let's move on to the Runicks. Of course, Runicks have no monsters, so we'll just get straight into the spells. Starting off, you got to have your 3 tip. Gets you the whole engine. It really just, it does anything you want. We're also playing 3 copies of Runick Flashing Fire. Just being able to have an extra destruction is really good. And then of course we also have the Freezing Curses for effect negation. Basically having an Imperm and an Ogre on hand are just really strong. And then, of course, you got to have your 3 Runick Destructions, being free back row removal. It's nice to have back row removal inherently in an archetype. It really helps out for a lot of matchups. For one-ups, we have 1 Runick Slumber, 1 Smiting Storm, and 1 Dispelling. These are basically all names, but they all have their own applications. Slumber being able to protect one of your monsters once from battle or effect destruction is really strong. Smiting Storm banishing cards on your opponent's field up to the number of cards they control also can be good in the right circumstances if you're going for a deck out, which is most common. And then Runick Dispelling, if they add a card from deck to their hand, you can make them discard 1 and then banish, I think it's top 4, which is a pretty strong card. Sorry, banish top 2 cards. I had that mistaken. So that's it for the quick plays. And then, of course, any Runick engine would not be complete without the 2 copies of Runick Fountain that we currently have legal. Even if it were legal at 3, I probably would still only play 2 in this build. I'll be completely honest. Alrighty, so after the Runicks, now we just have our non-engine here. We are playing Bestials. We have 1 piece of Magnamut and Druisworm. Both pretty good cards. If I had more Druisworm, I would play more of them. When I opened up my tins, I only pulled 1, so that's all I have for these guys. I have 1 Magnamut, 1 Druisworm, Jerusalem, and then I play 2 copies of Baldrake as just extra names. The biggest thing is they're just like free extenders. You can banish an Orcust out of your graveyard to summon them, fill up your banished pile for your Orcust Link monsters, and just do all sorts. Like, they're just extra disruption. Baldrake and Jerusalem are both just free disruptions during your opponent's turn. There are some cases going first where I prefer Baldrake over Jerusalem because you can choose when you use the Baldrake, not when your opponent removes the Jerusalem or when you have to link off the Jerusalem with an IP. It just kind of feels better to use a Baldrake, I think, and filling up your graveyard really isn't the worst thing ever for this deck. For spells, we do have 1 copy of Foolish Burial, free extender. I was playing Foolish Goods in this deck, but I needed to make some room, so I did have to cut it. I was only playing 1 copy, just because you can send an Orcust Crescendo if you don't open up any Orcust names, or you can send a Runick spell for an extra draw off a fountain. It was okay. It came up pretty decently, but as a 1 of it kind of felt bad, but Foolish Burial is like always good in this deck. And then lastly, for the main deck here, we are playing triple copies of Deck Lockdown, because outside of searching for the Runick field spell and using tip, you really do not care about playing Deck Lockdown at all. This deck can play around it so well, especially with Heart Pourer still being banned. If Heart Pourer ever came back, I probably would not main this card, but Deck Lockdown just does so many things into the format right now. It deals with Unchained, it can deal with Labyrinth, it can deal with a lot of decks right now. Pearly is another good one. This card is just insane, and being able to just play around it for free with your deck is incredible. Of course, if you're going second like games 2 or 3, you'll just immediately side these out, but there are some cases where going second, this is actually still good card to just like be able to shotgun against your opponent's board if you're playing against something like Labyrinth and they can't use any of their welcome traps, which is pretty strong. That's it for the main deck. Let's go into the extra deck really quick. So for the extra deck, I've kind of been flip-flopping around in this one, but we are currently playing 1 Link Karibo. I think once SP Little Knight comes out, I'm actually going to replace this for that. This hasn't really done too much so far. This is mostly for the Gearsu token, but there's not a lot of times you really need to link it off, so there's that. 1 IP Masquerena, just because it's an incredibly powerful card to link off during your opponent's turn into whatever options you need to. Once SP Little Knight comes out, this card will be a lot stronger, and I did already order one, so I will be having that in this version of the deck once that comes out. We're also playing 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy. A lot of dark monsters in the format. This really helps you to be able to just kind of extend further, grabbing stuff out of your opponent's graveyard and being able to link climb. Also 2 copies of Galatea, the Orcust Automaton. She is absolutely fantastic. I would love to play her at 3, but there's not as much room in this deck as I would have hoped, so I'm just kind of working around on looping her, and so far it's been pretty good. I don't think I've really had too many cases where the 3rd one has come up, but there's been a couple. Galatea, just a fantastic card, being able to get any of your Orcust spells or traps, namely getting a Crescendo turn 1. Turn 2, you can either grab Babble or Return. It doesn't really matter too much, but she's just a fantastic card at being able to loop your resources. Also playing 1 Nightmare Unicorn. This combos really well with your IP Masquerena, being able to discard a card out of your hand, which you usually have plenty of stuff in there, to be able to spin a card on the field back into the deck, and also being a Link 3 to be able to climb up and other stuff if you need it. This deck doesn't really have too many Link climbing options, but they are there. We're also playing 1 Long Gearsu, the Orcust Orchestrator. I mean, just a solid card, nothing wrong about him. Free removal, more resource recursion. If you really get into the grind game, he comes in clutch a lot, but overall, he's probably something you could consider trading if you really wanted to. Next up is something I know a lot of people wouldn't play, but in a grindier deck like this that really wants to play things out a bit more, we're playing 1 Orcustrian. This guy is just a wall for this deck. You don't even really get his recycling effect off all that much. It's just the fact that he's a 3k wall that inherently can't be destroyed by battle or card effects is just fantastic. If you do ever get that recursive effect off, it really helps to like be able to clear fields or at least like deal with a lot of things. I think Orcustrian is a pretty solid card all around, and I think I'm even going to keep this once the new version of my Orcust deck comes out after Agov releases. I think I'm still going to be playing it. Next up here, we do have 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, another good IP card in right circumstances. Just a good card overall, being able to help break boards, linking off an opponent's monster, helps solve issues like going against Pearly or any sort of Towers monsters. You just link it off, Dark Ruler no more their field with this, and then you also have a Graveyard Negate on top. This card just does so much, it's absolutely fantastic. Now for the Exceed monsters, of course we are playing 2 Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. You just really can't have an Orcust deck without at least 1, most likely 2 of these guys if you're playing a more pure version. Dingirsu is free removal, it's free recursion. This guy does absolutely everything, and I am such a huge fan of Dingirsu. Absolutely amazing card. The last Succeed monster they're playing is one Abyss Dweller. There are certain situations where you can make this going turn 1, whether it's be a Blind Dweller trying to think that you're against like Tier Limits or Unchained, or it can be games 2 and 3. You can make this if you know you're in one of those matchups that gets hit really hard by this card. It's a big blowout to a lot of decks, and you can usually still do quite a bit of stuff with going into a Dweller and then going through the rest of your plays. Lastly here for the fusion monsters, mostly the Runick stuff, we have 2 copies of Hugin, the Runick Wings, to be able to get our Runick Fountain from the deck. This also allows us to get a card out of our hand for cost, which means if we discard an Orcust Nightmare, we're just allowed to go full combo at that point. If we have a Girsu on top of that, it's even better. So basically your goal is that you want to open up a couple of Runick cards and either Girsu or Nightmare. Both are really good combo enablers that allow you to just play the game for free. And the synergy is just that the Runick cards allow you to send the Orcust stuff to grave, also give you a body on field to extend into a Galatea through Disruption. There's a lot of good things that the Runick Engine does. Of course, we are also playing one Gary, the Runick Fangs. You can use this to make your Abyss Dweller. You can also grab your Runick Fountain back from the graveyard in a grind game, any of which are fantastic. So far, this has been kind of a toolboxy deck, and I've been enjoying it so far. It's been able to do a lot of things that perform pretty decently for me. So let's go ahead and get onto the side deck before I ramble on for too long. Alrighty, so for the side deck here, we are going to start off with triple copies of Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. This was supposed to be my triple tactics talents, but I can't find the third copy for whatever reason, so I just put this in instead. This is still not a bad card. Being able to draw cards during your opponent's turn to recycle your hand a little bit, possibly draw into some Runick spells if you have Runick Fountain on the field, or just get into whatever you need to. Phantasme is a pretty good card. Next up here, we have 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. It's kind of hard to be a graveyard deck and not play Droplet. You can just get everything you need into the grave for free while being able to deal with your opponent's board. Also, now that Arise Heart's gone, this is much better to play. It doesn't feel nearly as bad. So Forbidden Droplet, just fantastic card. You can use it going first or second either. Like if you're going first, you just set it and you have it available for when your opponent starts to play. You can negate like 1 or 2 things, getting rid of stuff for free. I also love being able to use Droplet like with Runick spells. If you activate like 1 or 2 Runick spells, you can chain Droplet at the end of it, be able to send the Runick spells to graveyard as extra ways to negate stuff, and then you don't lose as much advantage because then you get your Runick Fountain on resolution. So all of this just feels, it's just a really good interaction. Next up here, we have our 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster and 2 Lightning Storm, just board breakers to help us deal with back row decks and sometimes monster heavy decks if they don't set up an Omni Negate. It does come up. It is pretty good. For going first, we are also playing 3 copies of D-Barrier. If we're against a deck that it's just like automatically loses to this, then we know that we're set. Something like Sword Soul, sometimes Pearly, just can't really play through this. More board breakers, more ways to just play through stuff. We don't really care about the battle phase. So if we're going second, we just side these in, drop an evenly matched on our opponent, go to main phase 2, and then just be able to play. Yeah, it's 1 less battle phase that we can skip for our Runick stuff, but in the end, it ultimately doesn't matter because we're not trying to OTK or kill our opponent. We're either decking them out or making them scoop just from out resourcing them. And so far, the deck has actually been really incredible at doing that. I love the advantages and resource loop that Orcust has, as well as being able to combine it with the Runick stuff. I know there's a big conflict with field spells, but usually for the first couple of turns, you're just going to leave Runick Fountain on field, and then your Orcust stuff is mostly going to be through your Crescendo, with having follow-up, being able to go Galatea into a Dingirsu to reattach a banished monster, something like that. And then turns like 3 and 4, you can kind of switch over to Babel and start building up your Orcust resources, and be able to do a lot of things to keep your opponent on the back foot, because by then you've already drawn into a bunch of cards and been able to get a bunch of things to be able to deal with your opponent. So that's all I got for this deck profile today, lads. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts because I was cooking on this one for a while. Patrick said it couldn't be done. He said he'd already tried it and he just didn't think the deck worked. And there are some awkward moments for it. It does take a pretty skilled pilot to be able to operate this deck functionally. I've had several slip-ups myself already playing this where I've realized I've gone too far into one side and not enough on the other. It is a hard balance to maintain, but definitely feel free to give it a shot yourself on like a simulator or something before going into it. If you want a combo tutorial, let me know down in the comments below, and be sure to leave a like on the video. We'll see you guys all in the next one. As always, remember, good fun. Have luck.
Cover me in colors I can only see with you. I'd be better with another, but I always pick you. I try my best to fight it, can't deny it. Touches diamonds, and you're probably the reason that I'm so messed up.